about Illuminati, since the charting up Peters. Is it Disney mind control? Is this MK Ultra Deluxe? Occult Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult Disney, should know what to chat for. Occult Disney, Pineal Gland, Pinocchio. Occult Disney, as a bomb so low. Pinocchio seeks fun on Pleasure Island, where traffickers meet just for the mind. Captain Hook, a lost boy in Neverland, saving kids from Peter Pan's designs. Nemo feels to survive the Barracuda, and that nobody needs no one. Snow White never took another breath. Bird Prince, the angel of death has come. Occult Disney, we go from real to real. Occult Disney, Bohemian Grove and no more real. Occult Disney, ask about to Illuminati. Occult Disney, we teach occult to everybody. Occult Disney, go wish upon a star. Occult Disney, you know what to chat for. Oh, Occult Disney, the new brand Pinocchio. Yeah, yeah. Occult Disney, it's a bomb so we go. Occult Disney, please enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. This is the Occult Disney podcast. This is Matt here, as always. On the other end of the world, it's a paranoid American.
The right end of the world.
The right end of the world? I'm at the left end of the world. That's cool. Okay. So, where are we today? We are actually somewhere in between, right? This is France.
This is actually a nice little midway point between us.
That's right, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Although I believe it's much closer to Florida than Japan. But yeah, 6-hour flight, I remember, from the States.
Is it a humble brag?
Yeah, enough. I'll humble brag enough that we were talking, you've been outside Notre Dame. I did have the pleasure of going inside, but they didn't have it painted all funny. Or is that not? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like when they originally built these cathedrals, they were like painted in like wild colors.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because it was like that was the Disneyland of the city in medieval times. So they draw people in by. I think that maybe like pastels, things you paint the stone, and all of that is chipped off over the years. And I think I read about a couple cathedrals trying to do that again, since that's historically something that happened, I suppose.
We can get into that because I've got a lot of notes that actually mirror the fact that churches are the original theme parks.
Okay, good. And then, it's Disney. It all kind of ties together nicely. As is usual, I guess we'll talk about our original experiences with this film, which I don't remember. I don't know if this is the first time I've seen it or if I saw it in the theater. I'm just like, don't remember. One reason being I work at a school where, there's like the playroom, TV room. And I think The Hunchback 2 is often on in the background. So I've seen it on a lot in the background. And I now have no memory if I've seen this before or not. I have not read the book. So, yeah.
I was a no for both. No book, no movie. This is the first time that I saw the whole movie start to end.
That's interesting. A little bit interesting because I feel like Disney at this point was going a little bit one for the boys, one for the girls. Lion King, I guess, was a little. Simba appeals to boys a little more. Then you got Pocahontas.
I don't want to sound like flippantly, ignorant here, but if it's got music in it, if it's a musical, I feel like it didn't feel like it was for boys for me at that age, at least. If someone started singing, I was like, oh, this is a girl movie.
But last week I definitely saw James and the Giant Peach, and like in the theater, I think opening night. So it's curious. I guess I probably didn't see this then, but that was just a time in my life. What's the 90s? What do teenagers do? They go to the movie theater, right? There's nothing else to do.
Yeah, I'll co-sign with that. Although I was up to much more nefarious ends than going.
Oh, you're up to things before and after the theater, of course, too. I'm just saying, I feel like a lot of 90s teenager evenings were centered around the movie theater.
I only remember a small handful of movies that I saw in the night. I'm sure I saw lots of them, but like as my own individual person, like Beavis and Butthead Do America, I think is like one of the only ones I remember. Gladiator, and I think Titanic, and I'm pretty sure that we left Titanic to sneak into Gladiator because they were roughly the same length, and Titanic was just a snooze fest to me.
Oh yeah, that one. I'll humble brag again. These were all like nice, nice like 50s style dates. But I think I took 3 different girls to Titanic.
Yeah, did it hit? Did it hit on the third one? Were you just waiting for it to go somewhere?
Well, actually, I did end up dating one of them for 3.5 years, but that was in university, so that was a little bit afterwards. But so it was like a delayed reaction. Long movie, delayed reaction, right? This one's a nice short movie. It's always nice when you start the video. It's like an hour 30 minutes. I can actually knock it out.
It's inching up though. They're inching because they used to be an hour and 10, and then it got to like an hour and 15, hour and 20. So I can see them getting longer and longer now.
Where are we now on the animated ones? I know when they do the quote unquote live action ones, they run like 2.5 hours because for some reason that's a normal movie length now. But I feel like the animated ones still probably tap out at about 145 now. So maybe we got 10 more years before they break the 2-hour mark.
I mean, I got a rule now when it comes to animations. If it's longer than an hour and a half, then I just adjust the speed so that it's about an hour and a half. And if that means that it goes by too fast, then that's their fault, not mine.
Right. No, I can get that. And I guess it's just, animation, even in the 90s, every second is so expensive. Whereas now, I guess you can fudge it a little more. I don't know. You probably know better than I do about that. So,
I mean, I think we're sort of inching. Maybe not in this movie. It would have been obvious if somebody just threw in a bunch of extra frames as filler. But yeah, I mean, at this point, when it's all digital, you just say like, oh, when this, you call it a tween because it means between the frames. So usually the tween animations, that would be where you would, in the classical version, you get your keyframers, and they are the ones that make like the heroic shots with all the detail. And they'll usually do these key frames. They're literally called keyframes for that reason. And they'll make those keyframes, and then they pass off the keyframes to the in-betweeners or the tweener animations. So that's usually where the guys would go in and draw all the little in-between things that have a little bit less detail. When that's done digitally, you could just tell the computer program, like, hey, draw me 20 frames in between these two keyframes. Or you could say 40, or you could say 200, or you could say 1,000. You know what I mean? And all of those would result in just having more frames. It's obvious the more that you try to stuff in there when you only had a couple keyframes. But if you wanted to make something 15 minutes, 20 minutes longer at this point, it wouldn't be hard to just stuff a few extra tween frames in between a bunch of different key moments, and no one would really be the wiser. The only thing would screw up is if you already had everything synchronized to music and sound effects and all that pacing was baked in. Now, all of a sudden, you can't just like throw frames in there because now the song has to get louder. And but it's all very possible, and it's somewhat trivial to make it a little bit longer.
Oh yeah, I mean they don't need to be. I think I guess what is the situation with people going to movie theaters now? I mean, when this came out, I was seeing maybe 2 movies every weekend, 1 or 2 every weekend. Whereas now I go to the movie theater once every 2 months, maybe. So, because I know it was like theaters want shorter movies to get people in and out, and now it seems that's not the case. Is it? I don't know, prestige thing.
I go to the movies once every 3 to 5 years at best. I might be an anomaly here, but I've just always hated movie theaters. I've never liked any part of the experience except for that the music was nice and loud, and it was like pitch black, so you could see the darks. But outside of that, man, I don't like having people coughing and laughing and eating and sticky floors and not having a pause button. So like I wouldn't mind if movie theaters just went completely into like the history books, and people used to just be like, grandma, grandpa, what do you mean? You used to drive somewhere to watch a movie? You didn't just pull it up on your phone? Like, yeah, that was dumb time and dumb people.
No, I'm down with the temple of the movies. Japan fixes most of the problems you just mentioned, except for the pause button, of course. But I also, like Americans.
How do they fix annoying? Is it just because there's no Americans there? But how do they fix people like laughing and clapping along with the movie or just being distracting?
Partly what you just said. It's not Americans.
Okay, well, we can't do that part in America.
We're kind of prone to go to movies at night, right? Like evening shows, late shows. In Japan, it's like during the day. So the cheap show is actually the late show, which is like 8:00. And if you go to that, I've actually had like basically private screenings. So
is there well, I don't know how that's scalable. Like that seems like the movie theaters are indeed, on their way out if it feels like a private screening.
Well, the afternoon movies are quite filled, and I'm talking like a Tuesday night in that case. If it's like a Saturday night, Sunday night, I mean, there's some people there.
Still, though, man,
it's like a matinee.
So weird to like in modern day to have a large building such as a movie theater, and for it to be normal to be completely empty because it happens to be a Tuesday. That's such like what other business could be like? Oh yeah, we just don't do any business at all on Tuesdays.
And to get it even weirder, that theater's in a mall that was built only like 12 years ago.
It is. Do they sell popcorn? Is popcorn like a big thing in the movie theater?
Oh yeah, popcorn, caramel.
How much is it? Do they charge like American style prices for popcorn?
No. The tickets cost a little more, but the concessions are cheaper. So, $3.50 for a nice tub of popcorn is pretty good. Because that's like $10 in the States last time I checked, which was a while ago, to be fair.
I don't know if it still wouldn't appeal to me, man. Like I'm all in for movies on demand and sailing the seven seas and all that.
My mom's been like that for years. I think in my life she's gone to see 2 movies with us, and my father and I have seen tons of movies together. So same thing. She wants to get up and like take a break, hit the pause, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I like that too, but sometimes that means it takes me like a week to watch a movie, or I'm like, man, I only watched half of that movie and never finished it,
You know what's crazy, especially with doing this Occult Disney series, is that normally when I just put on a regular old movie that's like an hour and a half long, 2 hours, like I'm going to sleep halfway through that movie. I don't know what it is, but the fact that I'm like trying to pay attention, and I'll have like a document up and I'll be taking notes. So I'm constantly pausing it and writing something and then like researching something and going back to the movie. And like I can stay up that way. It doesn't make me tired. But the second I just like put on a straight up movie, and I think that's another part of movie theaters, is that I was just paying $15 to go and take a nap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as I get older, I've had that happen a few times. And it wasn't great. Yeah. No, I'm not saying you don't have valid points. I just I'm one of those guys.
I always have valid points.
I like the ceremony of the movies. I mean, that your church is either like a church or a movie theater, basically, in the States, right?
You could, like everyone can develop their ceremony. And I don't know if movie theaters could win me back, but if they could, it would totally be with like the 4D experience where the chairs move and like mist, like sprays out. I know a lot of people think that's like ultra cheesy, but that would get me going back into the theater. I
mean, it's probably fun. I haven't done 4X. I mean, I live in the countryside. I have a nice theater, but they don't do anything special. There's no IMAX or crazy frame rates or anything of that stuff. So
I was a sucker for the 3D wave too. Like I was going and seeing lots of movies in IMAX 3D for a while, and then it kind of like fell out of favor again.
See, I didn't get much of a choice because in Japan, it's also, are you watching the subtitle or the dub screening? So the first couple of years I lived back in Japan, it was like the subtitled one was the 3D one, and it kind of flipped a couple of years later. The dubbed one was the 3D one. So, and by that's the point when they weren't doing them properly, and a lot of them were just like these like lame conversions anyway. So, yeah, 3D done well is great, but 3D done poorly is like 8 headaches at once.
Have there been any major Disney movies recently that were in 3D?
Did Wish show in 3D? I guess it didn't. I mean, there was obviously the Avatar bump last year, but
does that count as Disney?
Yeah, they got the World of Pandora at Animal Kingdom. That's got to count for something.
Okay, all right.
They own Fox now, right?
I'm not impressed by Avatar either. Star Wars, Avatar, almost none of the Disney huge IPs were ever really my favorites. We'll save
Haven't
that
learned
for
the way of
another
water yet.
Paranoid American Hates Everything episode.
They are long, I'll give that. And I have not rewatched the second one. I went to a theater. You know, I enjoyed swimming in the 3D aquarium for 30 minutes. That was nice. That was actually weird, like non-narrative movie making for about 30 minutes. It really was just swimming around with the Navi. And so you would have taken your nap probably, unless, well, no, it's a little bit theme park like too. So it was the most theme park experience I've had watching a movie. I'll say that.
I've also fallen asleep on the rock and roller coaster. So I'll just throw that out there.
I fell asleep playing the cello. That was kind of fun. If you want to play an orchestra and you want an instrument and take a nap, then cello is the only one because you can like just kind of fall on it and take a nap.
This is like the worst version of that scene in Lethal Weapon 3 where they're comparing scars, but our version is just like the craziest places you've taken a nap.
You know, last night I wasn't quite in the mood for the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, I needed to watch it, and I did. And actually, when I was finding myself enjoying it, I felt like quality-wise, it's up with the other Renaissance films, being one I think I've never seen before.
I mean, quality-wise, I'll go out on a limb and say to date, this might be the best looking animation in terms of the background matte painting and stuff, at least. The level of detail that they've put into the backgrounds, I think that's the best we've seen so far.
How about the crowds? They apparently invented a software called Crowd to create the crowds in this movie.
Okay. I mean, serviceable, not no plus, no minus. I think it was fine. And there was a much better integration of the 3D outside of maybe the bell tower scene. That one was a little dated, but every other use of 3D animation in this movie felt like it was done better than any other previous incarnation.
I think they built it out off of the gazelles, so they turned gazelles into people basically, and made it a crowd. So
there's something magical about that.
Here's one thing. I was thinking about the songs. Like I didn't really dig the James songs that much. And I after our podcast, I listened to another podcast about where they just two of three loved the songs. I didn't love the songs in Hunchback, but I was like, okay, these are working fine. I mean, they're very show tuny, but they seem well constructed. Because I was like with James, I was like, maybe I'm not getting into these songs because I don't really know the songs. I don't really know these either, but yeah, you get some Hellfire, which apparently is stopping up any remake of this because they don't know what to do with that song anymore. But
I mean, they just kick it out. They don't care about that.
You can't kick out the Hellfire.
Well, they kick out Sebastian in the latest Little Mermaid. Like, how do you kick out Sebastian?
Oh, and I think Sebastian's in there. This thing I did, that's like the only one I watched for our podcast. And I've mostly forgotten everything about it, except that everything looked like dreary and moldy. I remember that. But I think they had or am I thinking of the Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio? Yeah, that's the thing. These newer ones really don't stick in your head very well, you know?
Yeah, you're like, did I even see the main sidekick that I remember from the original?
Because they had a flounder. I know, yeah. They said, I think they had a Sebastian. So you're making me question my own reality again, which I guess is what you like to do anyway. But in this one, just to start getting, I guess, to plot points and things, the one takeaway that I had is I felt like this movie delineates that his companions are mostly in his head, more so than previous Disney films. I mean, you got Snow White talking to the animals and stuff, but
he also talks to animals in this.
Right. But with the gargoyles, especially, I felt like all of those sequences were actually fully him like talking to himself, like thinking out loud, but with 4 different voices.
Well, I mean, not to discount that the person that we're looking at, the Hunchback, is very likely mentally challenged as well as physically challenged. Like there's even the way that he speaks, it doesn't sound right. Like I don't know. I didn't look up who did the voice for Hunchback, but it was like just a straight up Jonathan Taylor Thomas style American like go-getter. But then like he's got 3 teeth that are crooked, and it seems like it would sound like he's just constantly chewing on the end of his tongue whenever he talks.
Yeah, I guess I couldn't really take that step. Also, I did like you're right. He probably does have actually. He might very likely have some mental issues. I just felt like I was like, well, the isolation has driven him insane. So I was like giving him full mental stock, but he's gone insane. The voice was Tom Hulce, who played Mozart in the movie Amadeus, and I forget what the name of his character was in Animal House, but he was one of those guys.
Oh, right. So he got Rock Me Amadeus and Rock Me in Hunchback of Notre Dame.
That's right. And of course, he plays Mozart as kind of an imp. So if you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah, I guess this guy is definitely mentally disturbed. And I don't know if it's isolation as much as just he was born that way, because he's not completely isolated, right? He still has this master that apparently shows up every day for lunch. I mean, that's more attention than some latchkey kids that I grew up ever got.
Yeah. That was a weird thing of guilt or whatever. Apparently, the character was supposed to be like an archbishop, and they were like, we're going to get, religious protests if we do that. So they changed him to a judge that just, I guess, hangs out in the church a lot. But it does make a lot more sense if he's like an archbishop or a cardinal, not a cardinal, that'd be in Italy, but yeah, an archbishop.
That does make a lot more sense.
And I mean, basically, you watch him. I thought he was in a religious role until I was like looking over and doing research at the end. And so, no, he's a judge. They made the change on purpose. I don't know what the book has him as.
Well, I don't know if separation of church and state existed in this particular time period within Notre Dame area. So I would say potato in a lot of different ways. Like they would both have some level of religious sort of, incorporation. It's just the difference is that in this movie, I guess it's almost like if you're playing tag or something, like the church is home base and like safe zone. So if someone's chasing you, as long as you get into that circle, like they're not allowed to tag you. That's kind of how they treat this whole operation. Like that's the only real religious aspect of it.
Yeah, they literally yell sanctuary, right? Several times.
Yeah, you have to say like a magic word in order for the state to leave you alone when you're in this area.
And of course, this also has, literal incantations. We keep talking about Disney movies, especially Fantasia, Toy Story, is like invocations, incantations, where I sometimes forget that there was that weird Gregorian chant fad thing in the mid 90s. And I wondered if that influenced this movie.
Or vice versa, or they were just hitting at the same time. Yeah, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, I feel like the CDs were like 94-ish. So like I feel like this might have been like taking a bit from that, like when they were doing the music. Well, everyone loves Gregorian chants right now, so let's do that.
It might have been one of the better musical notes of the movie, because Gregorian chants are timeless by definition.
One of my favorite my favorite iteration of that is the Electric Prunes 1968 album Mass in F minor, where it's like Kyrie Eleison and all that stuff done as like psychedelic jams.
I think I might be wrong, but I think Electric Prunes were produced by David Axelrod on a few of their albums.
You're correct. This is secretly a David Axelrod album.
Okay. Anything with David Axelrod's name on it, I'm all in.
Oh, get into that. Yeah, the Electric Prunes were, they did 2 albums as a band, often augmented by session musicians. And that one, David Axelrod came in, none of the band could play it. So I think by the end of the album, there was like one guy left and just session musicians. But that's who you want to hear playing David Axelrod stuff anyway. That's who supposed to be playing that sort of stuff. So yeah, they're a weird band, but I do recommend the Mass in F minor album. It's a short 28 minutes, like a lot of Axelrod albums. It doesn't last that long.
And this has been another episode of the David Axelrod Fan Club. Thank you.
That's right. What were the other voices here? Let's see. Demi Moore was Esmeralda, and just as a fun fact,
I didn't put that together until just now.
When this opened, it said, she had a deeper singing voice. But the funny thing is, I was looking at the box office, and I think when this came out, it was number 1 at the box office. Number 3 was Striptease, starring Demi Moore. So I thought that was subversively fun.
So she was doing double duty at the box office?
Counter programming, yeah.
Which is interesting because Esmeralda is also a stripper in this movie.
Oh yeah, gypsies, right? So those
Well,
dirty
not because
gypsies.
she's a gypsy. That's a little offensive, but she's literally
No.
a strip. I mean, she's as much of a stripper as you could be in a Disney movie. They give a lot of extra attention. At the end of it, the crowd is whistling and they throw money on the stage, and she scoops the money up. And later on in the movie, she's saying like, "I wish I didn't have to dance out in public."
Yeah, well,
She's a
that's the thing.
stripper.
I felt the same thing earlier in the movie when, say, the archdeacon. What's this archdeacon here? No, he's the nice one. Okay, Judge Claude Frollo. Frollo. Yeah, when Frollo does yell gypsy at her, that's the tone, right? It's more like he's screaming horror, stripper, horror Babylon, that kind of thing. Who else do we have? Who is Tony J? He is Frollo, which that sounds familiar. Okay, he's just one of those guys from the Royal Shakespeare Company. Or I should say, he's one of those fine gentlemen from the Royal Shakespeare Company. I don't know. Anyway, he probably
I'm not trying to break into that world. I don't care.
Yeah, okay. Kevin Kline is Captain Phoebus. He's a guy that just existed in the 90s and then just vanished, I guess. I don't know.
He's been around. He's kind of like the poor man's fill in the blank for a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like I haven't seen him since Wild Wild West. Like he was so embarrassed by that movie, which I don't hate that movie, by the way, but it's not great, but I find it watchable. But yeah, that seemed to just like instantly end his career, or maybe just, hung up his boots at that point. I don't know. Maybe
I think that movie might have been ahead of its time. Like when it came out, I think it was a little bit cheesy and no one knew what to do with it. But if you rewatch it today, it feels more modern than it did in the 90s.
Yeah, I watched it maybe 2 years ago for a podcast, expecting to feel that way, and then I watched it and I was like, okay, it actually is a little middling, but it's got some good stuff, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, you have to know the background between Louise Bourgeois' spider sculptures that she had placed all over the world in these big metropolitan areas. I don't know. There's a weave in there. I won't get into too much detail. We'll save that for an episode.
I'll certainly leave that there might be some layers to that worth exploring. So. But yeah, Kevin Kline is just like giant star in the 90s, and just
you kind of have to add layers into that movie in a way to make it entertaining.
Also, I got brainwashed by that movie because I worked at the Warner Brothers studio store when it came out. So I was just, the giant video was pummeling me with Wild Wild West like for 4 months.
Great song. I can't remember. They sampled part of that song from like another song, the Wild Wild West. Like whatever the little hook is, but it's a great. That hook is better than the whole movie.
Yeah, probably. That's that's the start of the millennium, I guess. I don't know.
That was the start of the millennium.
Now I know you didn't look up the voice actors, but we got some sitcom voices. I assume one of them stood out to you, or not?
Well, yeah, Jason Alexander obviously stood right out, and then there was someone doing what sounded like they were trying to do another Disney voice.
Well, one of them it said Mary Wicks was Laverne. This was Wicks' final acting performance. She died a year before release, and someone else had to actually pick up and do I guess not reshoots for animation, but there was some remaining dialogue they had to get someone else to do. Let's see. Flying Nun, maybe? I don't know. I'm getting a picture of her as a nun somewhere, but yeah. Both of them were quite old, it looks like, so they could have been a classic Disney voice, but I'm not getting a hit on what that is. So what? Oh, okay, here we go. There was two sitcom guys. The second gargoyle, at least, was Jim Dial on Murphy Brown. So
okay, I remember Murphy Brown, but I don't know who the hell Jim Dial is.
I mean, I'm looking at his face. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. But
was it the guy with the silver hair?
I think so. He doesn't in this picture though. But I haven't seen Murphy Brown since the 90s. It's never a show I actually just watched. It was just like the TV's on and Murphy Brown's on. There
was a reboot. I don't know if you know that. There was a Murphy Brown reboot a few years ago.
Yeah, Candice Bergen is. I guess she has some clout still. I don't know. And one more sitcom guy. The Archdeacon was David Udgen Steers, who was the second heel on MASH. Major Winchester. That's who it was. Yeah. Also,
Yeah,
very
all
good.
the heavy hitters for those kids in the 90s. They're clawing their way to see
kids. Well, I don't know. Do kids now want to go for celebrity voices? I feel like, especially in '96, it made sense to have like sitcom people do the voice acting. I mean, for marketing, because it's like, oh, mom and dad will be like, well, I like that person, so I'll go see the movie with my kid.
I think, I mean, this is just my own theory, but this movie included would be a good example. But I think when they're casting, they're not even thinking about how would Jason Alexander sound in this movie. They're thinking, how would Jason Alexander sound in the McDonald's commercial for this movie?
It sounds great.
That's what really hit. The same thing with Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I doubt anyone, and I'm out of line here because I don't know for sure, but I doubt anyone in the casting rooms were like, this kid's got what it takes to really deliver this performance. It was more like, this kid will sell these freaking underoos and these Happy Meals like no one else can at this moment. And I think that's probably where a lot of these things happen. And then that's when you get like really good movies and stuff with kind of no-namers or people that are usually in the background and like put it in their all.
Yeah. By the way, this one was very tied into the Whoppers for this particular movie.
Burger King Whoppers?
Heavy Burger King promotional materials for this movie.
Okay, yeah, sorry for saying McDonald's. For the Burger King, don't come after me. You own Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like
you're gonna open you're gonna go through your door and that creepy king is gonna be there just staring at you.
I did like that. That was a good campaign.
Yeah, I was thinking though, it's like, since he opened the first word he says, I'm like, oh, it's George. I'm like, does that mean he's not acting well in this? I feel like a good, like I never was like, oh, that's Demi Moore and Kevin Kline until I saw the list. So yeah. But
it would be interesting if they treated it like a Seinfeld episode. Who would the Hunchback be if this were a Seinfeld? Are we going Newman just because of size, or Kramer?
I was gonna go Kramer because of awkwardness.
Yeah, and also like a lot of slapstick and physical comedy.
Right. So yeah, there's your next AI project. Hunchback of Notre Dame is a Seinfeld episode.
Seinfeld, yeah, Hunchback.
So I guess we should talk a little bit about Notre Dame and cathedrals themselves. I mean, I had my Europe trip when I was the teenagers, so we bopped into a few. Impressive. I mean, it's kind of weird. Like America, I feel like has the least of this kind of thing, because Japan, we got temples out the wazoo and you could just hang out at them, where cathedrals kind of like ground your city. I don't know. You were going to talk about the theme park aspect of an old cathedral.
Well, I think there are some cities where that used to still be the case. Like St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York is still like a really famous one, although it's kind of been dwarfed by everything else. I think FAO Schwartz dwarfed it at some point in the 90s. But I mean, like Salt Lake City, a lot of like Mormon temples, Scientology, it's usually the ones that have enough money and don't have enough scandals where people are like, hey, don't you have a lawsuit to so I guess I don't know. I guess they all have those, but Mormons and the Scientologists, they seem to be flexing the like, look at our badass cathedrals game more than anyone else at this point.
Is there a Scientology city to speak of? I mean, obviously Salt Lake for the Mormons.
So you could say pockets of Hollywood, but Clearwater, Florida is also known as a Scientology hub. They don't necessarily own the city, but neither Mormons don't own Salt Lake City either. It's just very commonly associated with them. So I'd say Clearwater is the closest to that.
A few years ago, I was walking in Tokyo, just north of Shinjuku, if people know the city. I was actually just looking for tiny guitar stores, but I came across just this skyscraper of Scientology, which in the middle of Tokyo, which was kind of fun to see, and in the front, just like Dianetic books across the entire front. And I don't know, it just made me giggle a little bit.
It's got a cool name. For the longest time, I could have sworn that they were like, it was like Star Trek inside of there, just based on the name alone.
Yeah. And a very impressive building, though, big like marble facade and stuff. And in the middle of Tokyo, it's extra surprising.
Random tangent, but you said you were looking for tiny guitar stores, like tiny stores that sell guitars, or stores that sell tiny guitars.
Small music stores. I don't want the tiny guitars. I want a real guitar.
Okay.
Yeah. No, Amazon sometimes is like, do you want this little model of a guitar? I'm like, no, why would I want that? Well, when I can play. But yeah, actually, I don't remember what I was looking for, but yeah, there are sections of Tokyo that just are littered with them. I don't know, maybe New York City has an area like that. It's been a while since I've been there, so.
I think America's better at, like, well, for a while it was shopping malls. Like, no one could flex on our shopping mall game, and then Dubai came along and they were like, here's how you do a shopping mall. You need to have a blizzard and a snowstorm and an indoor surfing pool, just like all next to each other.
Some of those have collapsed though? I mean, the shopping malls in America seem to, you see all these
yeah, well, so the ones that relied on the outside public, a lot of those end up collapsing, but there's also a large portion of those that are literally just built for some royal family and for them to enjoy. So those ones stay running indefinitely as long as they just keep pumping the money into it. The public ones are like, they make a big splash, and then they're really hard to maintain.
Is IMG Worlds of Adventure still open? I don't know. The point being, I every year I got this listing activity, which is an article for the opening of IMG Worlds of Adventure, but that's from like 8 years ago, and I think they might have closed since. So,
well, like we were talking, churches used to be the theme parks, and this movie does a really good shot of some of that, where I guess the most poignant version in this entire movie is about halfway in, and they show, and I have to look up what the damn thing is called, the thurible. So they're going through like a mass essentially, and the priest comes out and he's swinging the thurible, also known as a censer, and it's got, like, incense that's coming out of it. He's walking around, and as he walks around, you see this big swirl of incense. The camera pans up, and it also shows a stained glass window, and then it starts showing some of the architecture. And this is a really, really awesome, like 5 to 6 second animation that kind of shows a really intense like breakdown of how churches used to be these theme parks. Because when you go here, right, you're going to smell something you've never smelt before, in the sense of that sensor. It might even have some psychoactive materials in it, depending on your research. We'll leave that one for another time, but that's also a very plausible theories that you just would go there and get blasted out of your mind. Everyone's getting stoned in there. It was like they were putting hash in it. So that's one version of it, olfactory sense. Then you're also, when you see these stained glass windows, those would produce colors that a lot of people would never see in their normal peasant lives. They would just produce, with these various pigments and refractions. And so that's another element where it's like, you're going here to smell things you'll never smell outside of that, to see things you'll never see. The music, the singing, the instruments, the acoustics, all of these things would not exist in your normal natural life. And then the like the cymatic style architecture that's kind of just baked into all of the designs, all the filigrees, everything around it. All of those things in my mind amass to like a freaking Pink Floyd laser light show, just the medieval version of that, right? So when you go to church, you're literally going and you're being transported to another realm where your senses are being overloaded in ways they never would be. It's really hard to relate to it today, because if you've got a phone, you know what I mean? Like, you've got every color in the rainbow, or essentially. I mean, I know it's limited to that, but it's a lot less of a big impact. Whereas this would be every Sunday like clockwork. You're almost being trained to like hear the big bell. You use the bell to go in, and that already prepares you of like, hell yeah, we're about to go and trip out and see some really cool colors.
Yeah, you had me at filling the sensor as hashish. I mean, and I do remember being very impressed by the colors, even as a teenager, and not in the middle of a service. Actually, I'm looking. I think this is kind of just as a fun fact. This was released in June 21st, 1996, which means I actually was probably at Notre Dame when this came out. That's kind of fun. That would have been when that trip was. So that's why I didn't see it. I was at the cathedral itself. which is, I don't know, maybe a better show.
I usually prefer the movies. It's like I prefer the album to going to see the live show.
Okay. It depends on which group, but yeah. So
Most of them.
it's been a little while since I thought too deeply about it, but there are theories about who built cathedrals and where they came from, and maybe us not being quite, the history book not quite having the right paragraph on that.
I hear this all day, every day from just the various circles that I swim within. So yeah, there's a lot of old world theories. There's the Tartarian theory, Atlantean theories, but a lot of those is that the cathedrals always existed. I don't know. I'm also spoiler alert. I'm also a Freemason, so I've actually heard lots of like Freemasonic claims of, this is what they used to be able to do back in the day, but a lot of the information is either lost or just no one cares about it enough. And I lean towards that second part. And also, you can't these cathedrals. I'm just going to go out on a limb here. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to assume people died building these things. People, lost fingers. They got maimed. They got incredibly hurt throughout these big projects. And it wasn't necessarily like, I'm going to go and file a claim against you. And now, you got to go and get your lawyers and we're going to get workman's
That's filing a claim against God.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, you're not going to be filing these claims. And I don't know if they had the same child labor. I don't know. There was a lot other elements going on here that aren't going on today. Imagine if you just removed all child labor laws, all workman's comp laws, just anything that could just make someone force you to work for pennies on the dollar all day long, no breaks. Maybe we could start making some really cool cathedrals again, but no one wants to have that conversation. No one wants to make that trade.
No, Atlanta has an Episcopal cathedral. I mean, that's I've been there because my parents go to Episcopal church, but somewhat impressive, but clearly not quite on the scale of an old European one. Because you wouldn't. That was built about 100 years ago, and you can't really build something that's going to kill 30 people a month, I guess.
Well, look at downtown Chicago is another good example. Those are all Freemasonic built buildings. It's clearly a slightly different style. It's not exactly Gothic. It doesn't have the same Renaissance look as Notre Dame, of course, but it has that 1920s Art Nouveau style look to it, which in its own right, relative to the rest of the architecture in America today, it's kind of like our closest version of that old world style cathedral building.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sticks out. Not like a sore thumb, like an interesting thumb in the middle of Atlanta, because Atlanta doesn't really have old stuff. Anything that was, there's nothing old there. So the slightly old stuff got burnt down, and then they built slightly newer stuff. That's basically how it works there. But yeah, you do, because I remember as a kid, you see Masonic temples all over the place. You're like, why is that such a big deal? And you're like, well, okay, you make your reputation by building that stuff. It's going to reverberate through time.
Yeah, it turns out that building buildings that stick around for hundreds of years tend to reflect pretty well on institutions.
Yeah,
if they sucked at it, that would be pretty obvious too.
I don't think Disneyland. Maybe Disneyland will last another 500 years, but according to some adults, I mean, that's going to crumble as soon as someone's not taking care of it. Where the cathedrals don't.
I mean, they'll get dirty and stuff, but yeah, they stick around. You'd have to actually try and harm it in order to bring it down.
I mean, there are old, somewhat abandoned old churches, but often they still have a couple of their major constructions still there, even if there's a fair amount of rubble sticking around.
So speaking of, just jumping in a little bit here, but they make this implication at the very beginning of this movie that the only reason the judge even takes care of the hunchback, because he's about to throw it down a well and unalive this little thing. And it's they're implying that all these statues are watching you, right? And they know what you're doing. They'll always know. They see everything and everyone's looking at them. And my first thought was did they know who set the fire to Notre Dame? Does anyone know who set the fire? Does anyone even care who set a freaking fire to Notre Dame? Am I talking out of turn here? Do you remember that when it
I remember
fire and they were like, oh well, it must have been an accident. Oh gosh, and that was the end of it.
Yeah. and then weird stuff started happening. It's probably started the new age. Or
So maybe they know. Maybe the freaking gargoyles know who set the fire.
Ask the
But I guess they're
gargoyles.
not
Ask
talking.
Jason Alexander. Yeah, for sure. We were talking about some NLP last week, and this also had a fair amount of it. A lot of gaslighting NLP stuff going on with how he talks to Quasimodo, making him repeat like how horrible he is, things like that. So that's
a little psychic driving in there. Throw a little Dr. Ewan Cameron MK Ultra.
Yeah, they put it into song form. I guess he's not sleeping in that case, but well, that
was only one of his many experiments. Not everyone was sleeping.
Right. Yeah, and this was in song form. You can't sing a song, but you can be, in a different state of consciousness if you're singing a song, because it's different than talking. We're just thinking.
That's very NLP, a very Miltonian, I think, sort of hypnosis.
I mean, I still remember the dumb song to help me remember my phone number when I was 6 years old, Good,
a lot of help that is.
Yeah, I'm not going to sing it, though, because it's still my parents' phone number.
That's pretty crazy.
I guess you'd have to know the area code, too, but still. maybe won't dox my folks on a public forum. You said you had some scattered notes. Is there anything you really want to hit? I mean, there's definitely things here to look at.
I mean, yeah, they're a little bit scattered, just like kind of loose bullet point. They're in chronological order as far as the movie's concerned. So, let's start on bells, because the movie starts out on the bell, and the hunchback works in this bell tower. And again, just like, I don't know if it will be NLP, but very Pavlovian, with the bell basically like reminding you, hey, it's time to act this certain way. And it also kind of denotes when the end of the day is there. So, I mean, just that alone, imagine. And I guess when I grew up in a small town, they had that. They had a church with a church bell that they would ring, and it would just remind you, like, oh, it's that particular time. Without that, unless you've got like an alarm set, you kind of live in a timeless world, unless you've got your own little cues. But for an entire town to all be sharing this same cue to tell them like when it's time to think about God, I think it does something like really interesting to that entire town.
There is so where I grew up, I mean, obviously we were close to the church, but not. I heard bells close. We'd hear trains, but as I do here, I live much closer to train tracks now. But something interesting in Japan, and it's sometimes in very rural areas where they will play a folk song over speakers, basically telling at 4:30 to tell people to stop farming and for the kids to go home for dinner. So, so it's kind of weird when you're walking out in the middle of nowhere and you hear this creepy tinkling theme. I don't know specifically what song, but
there's a horror movie in there somewhere.
That's what I'm saying. There's a horror movie in there somewhere. So,
let's see what else. I mean, like every Disney movie.
Bells. I don't know if that has some kind of value for you, but yeah, he's given them all names. Maybe because he just doesn't hang around many people, but.
Part of it, I actually haven't heard too much of that. Although there's a practice, man, this is crazy. I don't know if they do it in Japan as well, but in Korea, I believe, there's something called a living bell, and there's a whole story. I wasn't prepared with this particular note, but there's the legend that they made this huge bell, but when they would hit it, it wouldn't make a noise, or if it did make a noise, it didn't make the right noise, and they kept melting it back down, reforming it over and over again, and it wasn't hitting right. And then eventually they put a person, I think one of the guys that was working on the bell, they melt it back down, and while it's molten, they throw a person in there. And as he's screaming and getting, enveloped by the rest of this like molten this metal, after they reformed the bell with the dude inside, then it finally started ringing again. And it's like an actual bell that still exists. That's still the legend, that the reason that it sounds good is because there's a dude inside of it.
Oh my, that's much darker than what I was thinking of. So
where were you going?
I'm actually looking for a photo for There we go. When you said living bell, I immediately thought of this photo I had taken of me from Okinawa. And for those listening, I'm just standing inside a giant bell at a castle. No one hit it while I was inside. That was nice.
There's a bunch of different versions of this one, but one of them is the Emil bell. And there's also something called Mengdu, which is like a sacred rattle, but it's slightly different. But yeah, there's this Korean bell that somebody was melted into. So anyways, the thought there is like, maybe that's why they have names. Maybe those are the
Bob.
The people
that bell actually is Bob.
Bob was melted into that bell to give it that special ring.
Yeah. That's a darker road. I felt like he just named it, but hey, maybe not. He doesn't know the outside world. So if they're like, yeah, that's Bob. That bell's Bob. Just call him Bob. He was Bob. Okay. I mean, he doesn't know any better.
It makes it more special, I think.
Yeah. Brightens up his day with that.
I think I've mentioned this one before. I don't remember what episode, but the concept of I think it's Hito Bashura, which is where they a living pillar, and that's where they'll basically bury a living person under a building, the foundation, or under a bridge when they're building a bridge, and that way the ghost of that person basically protects the bridge or protects the building.
Unless they're pissed that they got buried under it.
No, I think it's part of it. I think part of it is that like they're mad, so anyone else that comes around, they like keep them out.
One thing that stuck out to me a little bit, I guess, watching it, just I guess we're still going somewhat chronologically here. Captain Phoebus, and then they had very specifically point out that that's a sun god name.
Well, yeah, that's another aspect of this movie, which is it was hard to pin down, but clearly it's about Christianity versus paganism because they're talking about getting these gypsies out of here. But what's weird is that the gypsies seem to be practicing like modern day Christianity. Like they're going to cathedrals, they're praying to God. She has a little map that looks like it looks like a Vesica Pisces with a fish and a cross and everything. So like if these are truly supposed to be palm reading, fortune telling, romantic gypsies, they don't act like it at all. They act like modern day Christians.
There is doing a little both, right? Putting on the act that you are doing this while doing your own thing on your own time.
Crypto.
Yeah, they're at the cathedral for a festival. So I've been at festivals at temples. Again, Japan's so weird that religion is like you don't really have an affiliation. It's just a thing. You can interact with it or not. You don't really have to associate yourself with it. Because in the West, it's so much like I'm a Christian, I'm a Hindu or whatever. So
like sports teams here.
Yeah, and we were at a temple last week, and pointing out, this part seems Shinto and this part seems Buddhist. It's all mixed together. 150 years ago, the emperor sent out a memo saying, make it distinct. And this is way up in the mountains. So obviously they just ignored the memo and no one came to check it out. So it's still all mixed together.
I have hope that it might not be in my lifetime, but at some point in the future, there's going to be like a Catholic, Mormon, Scientology mass that people just go to and no one can tell where the lines are anymore because the lines will all just have been blurred. Like you're going to go and pray for Jesus to give you like a good E-meter like score.
That sounds like fun. Sure, why not?
It does sound like fun. I think it should be fun.
Create your own religion. Everyone should have their own religion, like you said, make your own ceremony, right?
I think so, man. I don't know. I think it should kind of be like a little all-you-can-eat buffet, religious style.
No, I mean that's how I roll because I have things I do a lot, especially in terms of meditation. But it's just like my own weird, like it feels like a solid dogma now. But I'm like, well, it's not. I made it myself. So
we are so going to hell. I'll see you there.
Hey, if we get a party with the gypsies, yeah, sure.
Is Esmeralda going to be there?
Moving along, I guess you had a couple more points after the bells.
Yeah. So I guess in chronological still, Starts with an abandoned child, like every Disney movie should.
Oh yeah, so parents are dead 4 minutes in.
Right off the bat. We even see, I don't even know if it's the mom, but whoever is running away with the hunchback originally with Quasimodo, they have a scuffle. She doesn't necessarily get hit, but she falls and she hits her head on the ground, and they kind of imply that, she's no longer here. And I can't think of a lot of other Disney movies when a human being loses their life on screen and you actually see the moment that they die. Might be the first one that comes to mind when you see the moment that a human being dies.
They had to take this to the rating sport twice. I mean, it's just the difference between a G and a PG. They wanted this one to have a G.
Over this particular scene?
I don't think so. I'm looking up the note where it specifically says what that was. Audience it was something, part of the Hellfire song. He sang "Sin," and they didn't like that.
Oh boy!
So they just put the
no one cares
louder
about a human being losing their life.
Another thing they cared about is there's a scene where Esmeralda's in the background and there's flames or whatever, and they had to make it more clear that she was wearing clothes.
Okay.
so
boobs in the word sin, but a human being dying in front of children.
It does not seem that was
okay. Yeah, we can still sell whoppers if someone's dying. Just you can't, we can't let them be flame broiled if they're not wearing clothes.
Also, a scene in which Frollo sniffs Esmeralda's hair.
The president does that. That's fine.
Yeah, but this is 1996 when we didn't see it on the internet that the president was doing that.
He does it out in public, so all you had to do was just
now it's in public. Yes.
So that's an interesting one. I can't think of a single other Disney movie, even non-animated, where a human being dies on screen and they don't cut away and they don't imply and they don't show a shadow or any of that. Like, you see someone alive, they hit their head, they're no longer alive. The whole sequence. It stood out to me.
We've seen a few falls, but I guess maybe we don't see post-fall.
Yeah, you'll see someone like fall off of a bridge and then hear the goofy aha hooey. Someone makes that noise in this movie, by the way, and then they'll just like dunk, but it always leaves it open to like, oh, are they alive? Are they not alive? But this one, you see the back of her head hit a stone step. You see her eyes close immediately after that happens, and then they go over to her with a lifeless body, and it's like, oh God, what has happened here? And they say you've spilled blood or you've shed blood or something like that.
I'm still trying to think of did the Black Cauldron have anything like that? That's the only one that might have, because that's the only one that had a PG rating. But
even if it did, I don't think it would have been a human. It would have been like a non-human getting hurt.
Yeah, that's probably the case. That's the thing when we can't rewatch all these movies for every movie we do. So it's been 9 months since we watched that one, 6 months.
Yeah, shout out in the comments or write in. Is there another Disney movie before Hunchback of Notre Dame when a human being dies on screen? Cool.
Does Goofy take a life?
Yeah. On screen. We all know that he's got a huge body count, but we don't know if any of them on screen. There's also a really interesting note here in my mind when the judge is going to throw the hunchback Quasimodo down a well, and he says, paraphrasing, "This is an unholy demon. I'm sending it back to hell." And then he kind of like throws it down there. Well, this was actually, and what's crazy is that the archdeacon or somebody comes out and stops him and is like, "Think about what you're doing." But the church used to advocate this exact thing. Like the church wasn't the one stopping this. The church was usually the one. That's why he actually says this is a little demon. Like that's religion talking. That's not a random apolitical judge talking. That's not an atheist. And as proof of this, if you know who Martin Luther is, from Lutheranism, You might have heard of it. It's kind of a big deal. In some of his original talks that you can go and read all of the original writings, he would advocate about these changelings, and he would tell people about getting rid of changelings. And if you're not familiar with what a changeling is, in I think Scandinavian or some sort of European folklore, the concept of a changeling would explain that your baby got swapped out with essentially a older age fairy. So when a fairy, bear with me for a bad analogy here, but like when fairies enter old age, they don't necessarily have fairy nursing homes, but what they do is they're like, man, those humans over there sure are taking great care of that kid, like feeding it and keeping it warm and keeping it safe. So they just swap out your baby with grandma fairy, and they kind of trick humans into taking care of fairies in their old age, and that's the retirement plan. But some people, they identify it, they're like, wait a minute, this isn't my kid, this is a 90-year-old fairy that's on her way out. And in order to get rid of the changelings, you would dunk them in water, you would put them in the oven, turn the oven on, you would basically do anything that would cause the baby to cry. And as soon as the baby started crying, that was actually an indication that the fairy hopped out and sent the baby back in. It did a little switcheroo. Now, what was actually happening is people would realize their kids were no longer responding in ways that they expected, maybe like autism or any other, way of this, but they didn't have an explanation for it. So the explanation was just that fairies or demons have swapped your baby out with some abomination and stick it in the oven, and if it cries, then maybe your baby's back, or stick it down the well. So I mean, there's a dark story behind this and why he was dunking it in, but this is not the act of an atheist. This is what the church was advocating. Martin Luther himself was advocating for this.
So the judge Frollo is actually a hero for trying to murder the baby then. Okay.
Well, I'm not saying that necessarily, but they left all the rest of the religious connotations out here. It's interesting that they changed him from being, part of the church to like this judge, which is, I guess, in the minds of this movie, separated from church. It would kind of be the same damn thing, but
yeah, I think it's all just in the name.
But them wanting to kill this child because it had some sort of like a deformed, or like an abnormality, that is pretty much par for the course when it comes to like this time period.
Okay, here's what it says on the wiki, at least. One of the first changes made to accommodate Disney's request was to turn the villainous Claude Frollo into a judge rather than an archdeacon, thus avoiding religious sensibilities in the finished film, which there's plenty of religious sensibilities in the finished film, but whatever. As we were exploring characters, especially Frollo, we found a lot of historical parallels to the type of mania he had. The Confederate South, Nazi Germany, take your pick. Those things influenced our thinking. I mean, none of this really is, they're not really explaining why, to be honest, are they?
No, and there's a scene when he's talking about ants and the gypsies and how he kind of sees them as like insects. But yeah. I don't know, man. I'm keeping a note in mind here, but it's like, is that the worst thing that happened in a church ever? Really? Was someone talking about, gypsies and getting rid of changelings? Is that the worst thing that happened in a church?
Oh, there's a name for a dark podcast. What's the worst thing that happened in a church?
Oh God.
I don't think that would.
Again, and that was the whole thing too. Was like the mom or whoever the gypsy is that hits her head and loses her life, and then he's gonna like throw the baby down the well. Like even those things wouldn't even make the top 100 things that these gargoyles have probably seen.
Welcome to a Black Pill podcast. We're back again, another week. Probably not next week. We'll see. I don't know. It could be fun.
Buy some more freeze-dried food. Let's see what else here. I guess just because I didn't do great in Latin, I forgot it after I took it for about a year. Quasimodo means half formed, and yeah, quasi modo, like half of a mode, half of a form, or like they're not fully formed. So that was, that's just me learning our own language 40 years after birth.
Right. Hey, wait a minute. What's the name of the river in Paris?
Oh God, you just totally put me on the spot. I know the answer to this, but I'm losing trivia already.
Oh, okay.
Duh.
I can say it both ways. Sign or sin?
Sin?
Sin. Okay, I'm just sitting here wondering if I caught him singing "Sin," which is when they almost gave it a PG rating, and he was making a weird pun about the river. Because I mean, I was like 18 when I figured out it was Tim's, not Thames, and London. So I'm sitting here
So are you
wondering
saying that just the word sin is like a bad word, and that would have lost them a G rating by just saying the word sin?
Yeah, that was one of the things that the rating board came to him with. Trying to making
That's
the word less
wild, man.
obvious.
I didn't know sin was such a bad thing. You couldn't even say the word sin.
Yeah, I mean, the ratings board's weird sometimes. I guess, and since it was Disney, they're willing to tell them what it was. Because a lot of times, if you take a movie to a ratings board, they won't even tell you why they gave it that particular rating. You just have to figure it out and change it on your own and hope that you guessed right. I like it when filmmakers will come back with something more extreme. They'll be like, no, just go back to the old one. Use that. That happens sometimes.
A note here that just like another mo of every single Disney movie, that Quasimodo can talk to animals. That's one of the most typical ongoing themes outside of Disney killing their parents in the first few minutes.
Right.
This one, they might not necessarily talk back to him, but they understand each other. He can talk to a bird, and the bird hears him and does what he tells him to do, and has all the other emotions. But we don't actually see any animals talk directly back to him, but he talks to them.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you watch the movie and you come out remembering the gargoyles more than the animals, probably for that reason. So, it's like, yeah, if the animal doesn't talk, what was it, Tangled, where Rapunzel has her little gecko, which is cute, nice character design, blah, blah, blah. But you tend to forget about the gecko because the gecko doesn't talk.
That's a good gecko.
Good gecko. Just, you don't think about that as much as like, Iago or talking animals in other movies. That could just be me. I don't know. It's kind of a half question, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like you're throwing shade at a gecko for no reason right now.
For not talking, yeah. He's talk louder.
There's a really to me it was an ironic quote, but it seems like the moral of this movie, beginning out, again paraphrasing, but they say something to Quasimodo about life isn't a spectator sport. Don't sit around and like watch life happen, which is being said to you as you're sitting down and watching a movie. So there's, I don't know, something interesting about telling people don't sit around and just watch life go on as they're sitting down and just watching.
I think Ferris Bueller tells you that as well, right?
Yeah, life happens fast.
Very different context, but the end of this movie, I don't remember. Well, I don't know the end of the book. Sorry, folks, I did not dive into the book on this one. But
that's not what this show's about.
No, it did feel like the end of the movie I just felt like in the back of my mind, like a really sweaty writer's room trying to work out how to end this movie.
How did the movie end?
Esmeralda runs off with the Sun King, Sun God, Phobos, yeah. And then, but Quasimodo is okay because the crowd likes him he's getting his 5 minutes of fame, right? Mm-hmm. So Tamari might be a little more depressed, but the movie ends on a happy note. But yeah, he did just get like rejected.
Yeah, that was a weird one because first it starts out where like his goal is just to go out and experience the world, and he does that, and it's horrible as you would expect. That doesn't work out well for him. But then he meets this girl Esmeralda, and he kind of immediately starts turning into not like a bad creep, but a little bit of a creep in that just because she paid him just a modicum of attention, she becomes a love interest. Just like he just latches on now, and all the gargoyles are like, hell yeah, man, like she loves you, she's totally into you, which is kind of weird because you kind of know right off the bat, like this is not gonna work. Like I don't know if this would work out in Disney.
Well, that's where I think that's where I really got in my mind, like, oh, the gargoyles, it's all just Quasimodo's inner dialogue, and this is the only female he's ever met. So
that's actually a really compelling point, that the gargoyles are hyping him up because he's hyping himself up.
And I'm saying that like I really like that element of the movie because Disney movies usually don't have quite that component to the goofy sidekicks.
So let's just, as a quick recap so far, we've got a human being dying on screen. We've got a human being with mental illness and physical deformities. We've got a stripper, and we've got a pretty biting expose on religion in general, which I think also is represented by the gargoyles, because the gargoyles, they kind of say a few different things that sound weird coming from a literal fixture of the church. One of those is, oh, just do it once. You know, what Frollo doesn't know can't hurt you. They also say ignorance is bliss, which feels like a little bit of an inside job of, I don't know, the Disney movie to religion. And then they also say it's better to beg for forgiveness than to ask for permission. And none of those, I mean, on technicalities, I guess I can understand them all, but none of those feel very Christ-like.
No, it's a hardcore movie when you get to the themes. Looking again on this wiki page, themes and interpretations. The Hunchback of Notre Dame's thematic concerns include infanticide, am I saying that wrong? Lust, damnation, and sin. It's also a condemnation of abortion, euthanasia, and racism, and a moral resistance to genocide. Take the family out. Let's watch it.
I mean, some of those are a little bit heavy-handed. Like
They are.
The genocide is really just the judge doesn't like gypsies.
Yeah, but like you said, if it's about wiping out the pagans in general, we are now looking at, you know, genocides of the past.
Well, I mean, but that is the story of what was actually happening at this time successfully. Like that happened.
So it's suggesting it because it's a Disney movie, but what was happening was a lot more intense and violent and horrible.
Again, this is the first time that they even kind of hint at some of these like real things happening and address it. I mean, blood doesn't come out. This is Mortal Kombat fatalities without any blood, but it's still in there.
Like the Super Nintendo version, yes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is the Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat. They're just sweating. Everyone just sweats a lot.
But just so you can stick all of those words into your, just even if it's heavy-handed, just you can put all of that in your description of this Disney movie. And you're at least like, well, it's heavy-handed, but I see the connection a little bit. And some of it quite more tight. You know, damnation, lust, damnation, and sin. That's all around this movie, no matter how you slice it.
So I've got another one here, and this is I think is just building on my Disney proxy theory, which I won't re-explain to you or the audience. You can go and watch any of our other episodes, but in this case, the Disney proxy, where they're trying to get rid of your parents, so they're trying to teach you some lesson that's subversion of your parents. The judge is your parents. If you watch this movie, the judge basically is saying like, you can't go outside and play around in the city by yourself. I have to be here to protect you. I'm going to feed you. I'm going to teach you things. Like, this judge is actually in my opinion, I know this sounds weird, but he's being a good parent to Quasimodo. He
gives him a lot of attention. I assumed he was going to throw him in the white tower.
Attention. He's teaching him the alphabet. Like he's actually has a very true and earnest investment, for whatever reason, for Quasimodo to not just completely decay and turn to nothing. He actually feels obligated in some way. But part of that is that if you imagine Quasimodo and the judge is really like a 6-year-old and their parent, right? The parent is like, no, you can't go outside and play in the street. No, you can't just go out and talk to strangers. You have to stay in your room. You have to like eat lunch with, mommy and daddy. You have to clean up. Like, you have to do these things. And the entire premise of this movie is like, no, don't do what your parents are telling you to do. Jump out that window. Go play out in the street. Go talk to strangers. Like that's what everyone's encouraging him to do this whole time. And so the whole time I'm just thinking, like, Disney is telling you directly, disobey your parents. Go out, play. Like, don't listen to these authority figures, because Disney's here. And Disney's telling you it's okay to not listen to authority figures.
The guy giving you this advice is a dark, prejudiced murderer.
Trust the priest, little kids. If you're ever in trouble, just trust the Catholic priest. They'll take care of you.
Again, maybe that's why he's a judge, so you don't have like the Catholic Media Board coming out and complaining about it.
Yeah, it's another fair point. that that was also a popular movie trope around this time. I think lots of priests doing lots of bad things to lots of little kids
in movies. Yes.
Only in movie. That's all. This is a Hollywood fabrication.
Only in movies.
We all know
yes,
that.
yes, of course.
This is just part of Hollywood's attack on morals.
Bopping down your list, did you have any others there? I will see what I've got.
So Esmeralda obviously represents paganism and like this old world folk magic. They directly mentioned it a few times. They talk about her being a fortune teller and palm reader. She has a pet goat, which feels like it plays right into that same sort of agricultural worship. She's a stripper. She's got the oldest profession in the book. She also so there's a really good line in here where they bring in the sun god and they tell the sun god to like wipe out, the people. We need to put an end to the gypsies and the festivals and all of this. And he's basically saying like, you took me out of war for this. Like I was actually on like in a real war and you just want me to round up gypsies and arrest people for doing fortunes. And I'm just like screaming in my head, like, yeah, dude, like that is the real war. And that's what the judge even says. He basically says like the real war is what you see before you. Man, that's like some deep MK Ultra exposition for sure. They're literally telling you that you can do way more damage by attacking someone's festivals, covertly than actually attacking them physically.
Well, yeah, you go to another country, you can blow up their stuff. They're part of the society. You can, properly subvert it if you have the ways and means, can't you?
So, and then what else? Esmeralda. Just this is the most random note, but she's very understanding of someone just like breaking into her tent as she's changing, and then is like worried about the other person. It makes more sense if she's a
Screaming.
prostitute or stripping.
Oh, right.
It makes more sense that you walk into a stripper's dressing room. They might not react the same way as a regular. No offense to strippers out there, a regular person's dressing room.
Well, it's just like, yeah, you get used to your work situation, right? So,
Esmeralda also, the scene when she gets the coins thrown at her, that was like the scene with Selma Hayek and Dusk Till Dawn. It seemed very similar. I just had to throw that out there. And then
it's been a while since I saw that, but I can get that.
The best freaking Disney song out of any Disney movie so far, not musically, but the actual content and like the theme of the song is the God Help the Outcasts. Man, that's a good damn song. Again, maybe not the best musically, but if they had put, I don't know, maybe not Randy Newman behind this one, I'd love to hear. I need to get AI to make a Randy Newman version of this. Maybe an Elton John one. I don't know. This could have been a knockout, but it's going in my top 10 for sure.
Yeah, like so the music for this, I was like, okay, I see where if I were into show tunes, where this is like some pretty solid stuff, but I do have that show tune barrier sometimes.
And then again, just another harp on that. It's weird that this gypsy gives Quasimodo like a Vesica Pisces emblem that has the cross on it, and that's like his guide, his map to the city. I don't know. Is she just a crypto gypsy? Is that what that is? Or is there some kind of like a deeper message in here that's saying that these gypsies, and I'm only saying that because the movie calls them gypsies, so I'm allowed to, but that these gypsies are actually more Christian than I guess the judges, which would have made a much better point if the judge were also in the church, right? If he was actually the deacon or the cardinal or whoever the hell he was supposed to be, then it's like these folk magic gypsies understand his religion better than him. But the fact that they remove him and turn him into, I guess, this like agnostic atheist judge, you lose a lot of the extra power for that.
Yeah, for some reason I kept thinking of the movie Logan's Run, where they have sort of the underground. They're not gypsies in that case; they're runners, but they they use the Ankh symbol instead. They don't they go for the Egyptian, not for the Christian. But that's also a sci-fi dystopia, so it's kind of hard to put the two together and have a match.
I mean, an argument can be made that the Ankh and the crucifix are kind of the same thing.
Yeah, they're definitely cousins, close cousins. So
they're kissing cousins.
Yes. Everything else I wrote is basically just weird, snarky stuff.
Let's get weird and snarky.
Okay, what I write? The songs in this are all fine. I won't be humming them, but I do have the Alf theme stuck in my head, and I haven't seen that for years. When they go to the
Alf
graveyard,
is worth a rewatch. It's actually Alf was the first Married with Children / Simpsons in my mind. They actually addressed like poor people problems.
I think I have the first season on DVD, so I haven't watched it for a while though. I bet they're going to vandalize Jim Morrison's grave when they go to the graveyard. This isn't snark, but I did hear a musical cue that they just had a little touch of Berlioz's March to a Scaffold stuck into the courtyard scene, when they're getting judgmental. So I like that.
I did appreciate in part of this movie where the songs and the dialogue were kind of interlinked. Like every once in a while they would just like sing what they were saying, but it wouldn't turn into a full-blown song. It was just like a melodic talk. It's hard to describe, but it was.
That's why, especially when he's kind of gaslighting / NLPing him, because it, like you said, that the dialogue just kind of naturally shifts into a not quite song.
I like it, although I was also thinking this probably makes cutting like the original soundtrack as an album a little bit more difficult, because now like in the halfway through the song people go back into talking and then back into song, so it might not have been the perfect translation that way, but I kind of liked the variety.
That's for the record producer to figure out anyway. We have Lava solves all problems. He also Terminator 2. Oh yeah, here is my take last night watching it. I said after this experience, I think next week, if you visit Quasimodo, you're gonna find a brand new incel after this experience. Like I'm like this ending's only happy for him like this afternoon,
Yeah. Just get I don't know. I haven't seen version 2. What happens in the second movie? Does he like track?
I've never sat down and watched it. It's just on. I had to turn the volume down because a bunch of 7-year-olds sat down and turned it on at top volume. So I turned down the
Quasimodo just an incel for the rest of his life.
I mean, it's like that's the thing. This movie kind of suggests, like, you can be too ugly and screwed up for romance. Which I don't think that's a great message. This
is actually the opposite of Beauty and the Beast.
yeah, really. I mean, she hooks up with what's his name instead, right? So
he gets friend zoned immediately.
I mean, I thought they did a pretty good job of balancing, like the Kevin Kline character, whose name I keep forgetting, our sun god. Like, I mean, they did a good job working with this character in the movie, but still, it's just this seems. I don't think if they made this more, I don't know. It's a
you know what? I'm just going to throw this out there, but in 2024, AI has given us the power to make some romantic fan fiction where Quasimodo and Esmeralda do end up together romantically.
I don't care that much, but someone's already done that, by the way.
Okay, yeah, I guess so.
I'm sure
of course
someone's already done.
Are you saying this from experience or just because you assume so?
I'm going rule. Is 34 the one where everything turns to porno? Is that where all discussion ends up with the Nazis? I don't remember which one's which.
So that's Rule 34 and versus Godwin's law.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, I always mix those two up, but yeah, I'm sure.
Which also are compatible. There's also a Rule 32 version of Godwin's law, both of Hitler and Godwin.
Okay. Hey, mix it together. That works out fine. Anyway, yeah, that's most of my snark. So I guess I can wind this one down unless you got something else on your screen there.
I would like to point out that I had a legitimate gypsy put an actual curse on me when I went to Rome. So there's
how'd it go?
I mean, I don't know. Maybe life could have been way better than it is right now. As far as I know, it didn't have any impact. And it was
been
just
way worse.
Well, no
Maybe
one
it
gave
was
her money. She was begging on the side of the street. No one gave her money. So I don't know if there's like a certain type of magic that if you actually offend them, like Thinner style, like in Thinner, didn't he like run over a kid or something? You know what I'm talking about?
I read it when I was 12. That sounds familiar.
It's a decent movie. It's not a bad movie, but he gets an actual curse put on him, and no matter how much food he eats, he keeps getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Hence the name.
Okay, I didn't know it was a movie. I think I read the book way back when, but
movie and book, I guess. But But I always wondered, because I've actually, like, I'm not lying, I've actually had an old lady gypsy with like the hook nose and the big wart with the hair growing out of it. Like, she came directly out of a freaking Disney movie and put a curse on me and a bunch of my friends. And I've always wondered, did it not work because it was like frivolous? Like, she was just mad that no one gave her money? Or if like someone had actually done something bad to her, does then the curse work? Or was she just mentally just, I'm gonna go with she was probably just like a mentally disturbed Quasimodo. Putting
How are your friends doing?
Funny you should ask that. Actually, I might be the only one still alive out of that group. Although until this exact moment, I never actually considered that as a factor. That actually freaks me out a little bit. Thanks for bringing that up.
Oh yeah. Sorry if I ruined your
it was two friends, and yeah, neither of them are on this planet anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully that you could be like curse finished. I don't know.
Like a Final Destination situation. I have to just like constantly avoid gypsies whenever I see them now.
Is that okay? I don't know.
Like I'm on like the freeway, and there's a huge semi truck, and they've got a bunch of like loose gypsies that aren't tied down very well. I'm like worried that they might fly like through my windshield.
Is there cool music coming out of it?
I mean, again, AI, everything's possible.
Well, let's pull this one into the cathedral, I guess. It's probably mid-February at this point. What's up?
I got a new series that I'm playing with that maybe we'll do one. It's all fully produced. They're like little 15-minute episodes, and it's called Saturday Morning Conspiracies. And it's where I take like old 80s shows. The first episode is on He-Man, and the premise is He-Man Jesus, or is He-Man Knights Templar? And I think the answer to both of those is yes, in a very obvious way, but these are cool little like 15-minute produced mini documentaries that kind of give you all the firepower in the background of why He-Man is Jesus, or the Knights.
He was my Jesus when I was 4 years old, for sure.
Well, there's a lot to that, man. He's a prince named Adam that sits the right hand of his father. He rides in a chariot. He wears a gold cross, or a red cross on his chest. He summons the power of light. There's like, it's kind of, he fits right into the Hero of a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell style.
I've only done a proper head in the water first dive once when I was 6, and it was for swim class. And my dad was like, if you do it, I'll buy you Castle Grayskull. That's why I got Castle Grayskull.
That's pretty insane, man. That, I mean, the He-Man sets like that were unrivaled, in my opinion.
I guess he really wanted me to jump in the water properly.
Did you shout out by the, I have the power before you jumped in?
Oh geez, I don't think I was smart enough at age 6 to do that. I think he just said it, I was like, boom, Is that
where the head injury came in?
That's right. Hit the bottom of the pool. Yeah. Water and head.
Chosen1.com. Go visit chosen1.com. It's easy to remember if you just sing along. Chosen1.com. Go visit chosen1.com. The chosen one. Yes, he is the chosen one. He's got his own comic, and now he's got his own song. 'Cause he's the chosen one. Yes, he is the chosen one. Go buy a copy at chosen1.com. Chosen1.com. Go visit chosen1.com. It's easy to remember if you just sing along. Chosen1.com. Go visit chosen1.com.